Hey, it's Jeremy from jeremy.net and patreon.com/Jeremy. The Patreon is up and running. So if you enjoy these videos or if you enjoy the comics and artwork I share online, pop on over there and subscribe and donate. So before I got into drawing, I thought I would show you a little bit of what I've been working on the past couple days. So I've got pages 3 and 4 of issue 7 of Morningstar. And see my nephew Clay is on there. Hey Clay, how you doing? Drawing some more comic books and just showing people what I got going on. So this is page 3 and page 4 of the latest issue of Morningstar. And I will tell you that in previous issues, once I started picking up speed, it usually took me about 4 or 5 hours to finish a page. Clay asked how I'm doing. I am doing very well. I got to spend a large chunk of yesterday just drawing. I had a lot of other stuff that I needed to do, some uploading to my website, some preparing some more rewards for the Patreon campaign, a lot of other things that I needed to get done, but I really wanted to have a day to just sit and draw because it's really relaxing. It's the main reason why I publish comics and why I have the whole YouTube channel and all of that, is to get the word out about the thing that I'm really passionate about, which is just sitting down and drawing. So in previous issues, it usually took me about 4 to 5 hours to finish inking a page. However, I have noticed when I worked on this particular page, this one took me, I think, probably closer to 7 to 8 hours. It really kicked my butt. And part of that really is the backgrounds. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more because it might be a little bit blurry on the live stream, so I don't know how clearly you can see the artwork. But this page, in general, I try to work on my weaknesses. And that particularly includes, backgrounds. Anything like when it comes to drawing animals, there's deer and horses in this issue because I needed the challenge of improving at them. Drawing environments, not just backgrounds. For me, the challenge has been drawing environments because backgrounds, I realized that the way I was drawing them in the past was that it was like a backdrop, like a stage background, like a flat piece of scenery behind characters. And what I'm trying to do is draw environments where it feels like there's space, there's dimension, the characters moving in and out of areas. And that's what I've been trying to up my game at conveying in the latest issue. So this issue and this page in particular is a pretty prime example of me trying to push my storytelling abilities to a new level. Philip DeGraves popped in. Thank you. Good morning. Happy to see you. Thanks for joining me on the stream. So yeah, this is one of those things where as I was working on this page, and I kept thinking about how much longer it was taking me than pages I've drawn in the past. Anytime an artist is taking a long time with a piece, there's a certain anxiety that creeps up where it says, hurry up, draw faster. But I keep thinking about that old adage for comics, and I don't remember who originally said it, but they said, first you get good, then you get fast, then you get good and fast. Philip DeGraves said, you should do black and white. You should do black and white books. The work looks amazing. Well, you know what? Morningstar is published in black and white. If you go to amazon.jeremy.net, and I'll spell it because my name is spelled weird. But if you go to amazon.jeremy.net, you can see volume 1 of Morningstar, which has issues 1 through 4. That's in black and white. All of the regular issues are in black and white. They do have Photoshop gray tones, but essentially it's a black and white comic. See, this is what I get for working at a different part of my desk. I was working out at the living room table so I could hang out with my wife while she was watching TV. Now I can't find my Post-its. They were somewhere out there. But anyway, you can also go to previews.jeremy.net. It's previews.ger IMI.net. And there you can see there should be a 12-page preview of every issue of Morningstar published so far. So issues 1 through 6. So you can go over there, check out the artwork. It's a 12-page preview, so that's half the issue. It's a lot to read and check out. And you get a good sense of what's going on with the story, even if you don't read the whole issue. So yeah, go over there and check those out. Anyway, this is what I've been doing over the past few days, working on the latest issues of Morningstar. I'm very happy, even though they're not perfect. There's still definitely places in here where I'm like, I could change this, could have done that better. But overall, I feel like the extra time I'm putting into the book is showing. And that's the important thing. I want the work to continue to improve and to grow. So let me set these pages aside. All right, so now I'm working on a new page. I'm going to start with inking the holding line, sort of the outline around the whole thing. I'm going to adjust the position of the camera a little bit, so bear with me. Just move this up and a little higher. All right. So I'm going to start with the figures in the second panel, because what I try to do is I try to draw all of the backgrounds with a smaller brush. And I like to start with doing the larger brush first and working out all of the silhouettes of the figures. Let's see. Philip asks, I need guidance on studying anatomy. Well, I have a bunch of videos, and when I'm done with this live stream, you can click over in my channel. If you look at my playlists, there's a few videos on education and inspiration. I think that those will have a lot of the talks I've given on anatomy, on different books that I've studied and how I go about studying, going to figure drawing classes. But I will tell you this. Let me move away from the camera for a second. For studying anatomy, these are my go-tos. George Bridgman, The Human Machine. Atlas of Human Anatomy for the Artist. The Figure by Walt Reed. This one is more of a newer edition. One of my classmates from my figure drawing class at the Guild, Tanya, she definitely highly recommended this book. I got it last year, and it's definitely coming strongly into rotation. So these are sort of my go-tos for studying figure drawing. There's another one that I don't actually have the physical copy of Andrew Loomis's Figure Drawing for All It's Worth. I should have a copy of that because I have printouts from back when it was out of print. So I've got different sections here and there that I study from, but it's back in print again. It should definitely be in my wheelhouse. It should be one of those staples. Philip mentioned that he never understood Bridgman's books. And by the way, I see American Swordfish popped in. He said that the page looks dope. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. And Clay also asked if I can do a Fortnite comic for you. Well, maybe I can do like a one-page comic strip, but I got to finish this issue of Morningstar first. So, Bridgman can be difficult to understand. One of the things that I realized, I tried to use Bridgman's books. I was first shown his artwork when I was in high school, and I didn't understand it. The thing about Bridgman is that he doesn't draw pretty drawings. What he draws is structural, chunky objects that give you the sense of the shape of the thing that he's drawing. It really is something where you kind of need to know how to draw a little bit before you can really use what he's telling you. Because what Bridgman does, and it's kind of weird because it seems counterintuitive, is you might probably, Philip, be better off starting with something like Walt Reed and the figure. This is kind of closer to the stuff that's in Andrew Loomis's Figure Drawing for All It's Worth. And what Walt Reed does is he starts with very simple cylinders and cubes. And the whole book builds on top of these. So this page is just one example. The book does get into, you know, more detailed figures and features. They get into proportions, and it gets into anatomy, but it all builds on top of simple cubes and spheres and cylinders. What Bridgman does is he goes sort of deeper into that, and he basically says, when you look at the human form, you don't see cubes and cylinders, you see all these different muscles. And what he's trying to show you is how all of these organic forms, which are irregular in terms of their shape, and that they change shape, because muscles aren't static. When you flex your fist, that the muscles in the palm, that pad there, that changes shape when you pull over. It's the same thing with like your forearm when you flex it, or like with your bicep, as I whack the camera. It's not a good angle for me to flex. Point being is that, oh, there we go. See? The bicep changes shape. It's longer and has a different shape than when you compress it and pull it in. It becomes rounder and more spherical. That's true of all these muscles. They're already irregularly shaped, and then they change shape as they flex. And what Bridgman is trying to show you is what's going on under the skin within these cylindrical shapes, because these are the basic forms. But what happens is some of the muscles, as they change, bulge out of these cylinders. Some of them shrink within them, and the cylinders become narrow. And that's what Bridgman is doing. He's sort of like going under the surface. That's why this book is called The Human Machine. But yeah, I recognize the challenges that Bridgman has when you're first trying to learn anatomy. I have found this book useful, but you're right. It isn't necessarily a beginner's art book. So I would definitely take a look at something more like Walt Reed's The Figure. I think that that's a good one for you to check out right away. But the other thing I was going to say is, in combination, with art books, it's figure drawing workshops. An instructed class is usually best, but even an uninstructed workshop where you get in front of the model, there is nothing like drawing from a live model. That will help you. Oh, I see Philip Ball said he's not a beginner, but he still doesn't like Bridgman. You know what? That's fair. Some people just don't like Bridgman. I used to think that it was kind of weird and chunky, but you know what? I also used to not like Jack Kirby until I understood what he was doing and why it made sense. So Bridgman might not be everybody's taste. Some people don't like him, and that's fair. This is the Walt Reed book. It's called The Figure. It's available on Amazon. They might even have copies at your local library. So it's a book that's been around for a long while. It's worth checking out. Let's see. I have seen Michael Hampton's book. I kind of, he's not necessarily somebody that I'm personally into, but, whatever works for you. I like, there's a book called Force, and there's a book, I can't remember what the other name is, but that one looks really interesting, and I haven't picked that one up yet. I would say beyond Walt Reed, Andrew Loomis is probably one that I go to a lot. But what I was going to say is figure drawing workshops. I don't know how often you have time to get to figure drawing classes, but I have found that helps me more than anything else. It's just getting in front of the live model on a weekly basis. I've been taking a lot of classes with Carl Ganas. He has a channel on YouTube also. You can check that out. It's GNASS. His videos aren't necessarily, he's got a few on there where he's got some of his lectures, and he's got a few where he just talks about art and creativity in general. But a lot of my figure drawing and how I study the figure is influenced by the approach that he's taught. But a lot of it just comes down to understanding. Sitting down with a book and learning the concepts, the basic volumetric concepts, and then trying to put those in practice in front of a model, actually testing them out, trying to break the concepts, see what happens if you use it, see what happens if you do something different. I still feel like I have a tremendous amount to learn in terms of drawing anatomy, but that learning happens at figure drawing class. So yeah, that's the other thing I would recommend. Definitely do that. Let's see. American Swordfish also. Oh, I see Iron Rocks came in there with a shout out for Kirby. Said Kirby's awesome. Yes, he is awesome. And Philip also mentioned the Force line of books. Yes, that I haven't read them yet, but those are books that I want to check out. Let's see. You guys are real active on the chat. Thank you for showing up and throwing out these interesting questions. American Swordfish asked whether you can request specific body types for the model, and no, you get what you get. And I think that that's a good thing, because you usually, but not always, it tends to alternate 1 week female model, 1 week male model. The instructor will schedule the models based on what lesson he wants to teach. So if he's doing something specific on anatomy, he may get someone that's lean. If he's doing something about mass and volume, he may get somebody who's either muscular or heavier set. But it is important to draw a wide variety of body types. And I think that has helped me tremendously, drawing a wide variety of different types of human beings. So males, females. You know, I don't think we ever had any trans models, but you know, maybe it's possible we had trans models and I didn't know. It's very possible. But we've had a wide variety of different models for figure drawing class. And no, you just show up and you draw who's there. You draw who's in front of you. So I'm starting with an outline, and I can already tell you that I am making too many lines in this outline. Like, it should be, even though the surface is broken, the silhouette is broken by like the eyes coming out of the top of the skull, I should be drawing this as a little bit more of a smooth, consistent line and have just little parts peeking out of it. I'm doing a little bit too much of bloops and blobs, just dancing around it instead of drawing a fluid, singular outline. And part of that is just starting out. You know, this is the first page of ink. This is the first drawing I'm doing in the day. And there's always a little bit of shaking the rust off. And there's also the fact of drawing while talking at the same time. So I blame you guys. It's your fault. You're wrecking my drawings. I'm kidding. But yeah, that's an interesting thing, is being aware of these things while you are actually drawing, because you don't want to be constantly thinking, oh, this sucks, that sucks, and paralyze yourself where you can't move, where you can't draw. But if you're aware enough of what you're trying to do versus what's ending up on the page, it can kind of allow you to compensate and adjust as you go. And that's important. That's very important. You want to be able to calibrate, because you don't just expect everything. I mean, I know I don't expect everything I draw to come out perfectly. Excuse me. Let's see. Ion Rock said, I don't know how you do it. Inking was never my thing. I have covered that in previous videos. It was very, I wouldn't say it's very simple, but what I did was, I'm just pausing so I can drink some water. I draw my thumbnails with a brush. Inking in general just comes down to getting comfortable with drawing with your Inktube tools. Whether you're drawing with technical pens, whether you're drawing with brush, whether you're using crow quills and nibs, it comes down to getting comfortable drawing with those tools. Not inking with those tools, drawing. Meaning just sitting down and drawing pictures, not necessarily to be finished, perfect pieces of artwork, but just to practice mark making, to get your hand used to getting the tool to do what you want it to do, to have a picture in your head. So it comes down to sketching in ink, having a sketchbook and a brush pen or a brush or whatever tool you want to practice with, and using it to just doodle. That's what it comes down to. Use the tool until you get comfortable with it. I was never comfortable inking with a brush, and I've told this story before. One day I was doing convention sketches with a brush pen, and I sort of looked at the brush pen, I looked at the size of the tip, and I realized, oh, that's the same size, you know, or I guess not really that it's the same size, but I realized how great the results I was getting. That grammatically is not right, but I realized I was getting really good results with the brush pen, and I said, why can't I get these results when I try to ink with a brush? And I realized it's because I was using brushes that were too big. I was trying to do like experienced inkers that have like a number 4 or a number 6 Raphael Winsor Newton brush. They could get these beautiful lines that go from thick to thin, and they can get this nice fat brush, load it up with ink, and then do like half a panel because they just have the control and they can just make it flow, and they can get thick lines and thin lines and get different effects. And I realized, oh, I don't have the control that they have. Maybe I should just treat brushes the way that I would treat a repeatograph. You know, I'm not gonna try and ink an entire page with a repeatograph, with like a number 2 repeatograph or a micron pen. I'm going to use a number 5 or a 0.05. I should say a 0.02 or a 0.05, which are very small. Those are millimeters. I'm not going to try and ink an entire page with a very, very small pen. So why try to ink a page with a very, very large brush? Instead, just switch sizes depending on what type of thing I'm doing. Like I used number 2s for my outlines, and for doing generally, like I wouldn't spot an entire large mass of blacks, but I would use this to paint all of the blacks inside, say, this figure. So most of this figure, since it's a demon and he's mostly dark shapes, there's only a little bit that I'm gonna use my, my 00 brush. Most of this is gonna be inked with this brush. Whereas the background that's above, I'm gonna ink it mostly with a 00 because I wanna get that sense of delicate line work for the backgrounds. I want the backgrounds to fall back from the figures a little bit, and using thinner lines is a way of doing that. And like I was saying, a really experienced inker with a lot of control can get a wide variety of thick and thin. I don't have that level of control yet, and I don't know if I'll ever get that level of control because I'm kind of I found a method that works for me where I don't have to do it, so I've kind of cheated myself out of it, but B, I have kind of a loose, sloppy, rough approach anyway. So who knows whether I'll ever develop that level of control, but I have found a way to get the results that I want, which is a variation of line weights just by using different sized brushes. And even with that, I kind of have to, the challenge I find lately is as I'm developing a more sensitive touch, I have to remind myself to keep my thick lines on the underside, the areas facing away from the light, because I will sometimes just start drawing really lightly and the lines coming out of the number 2 brush start to compete with the lines coming out of the 00. And for comparison, I have no idea whether this will show up well or not, but so here we go. There's the camera. That is so weird. All right, there we go. So that is my, let me wipe this off so it doesn't drip on my page. This is my number 2 brush that I'm using right now. This is my 00 brush. So you can see smaller, thinner. This one's coming to more of a point, but that's because it's currently wet. This one, I didn't do a good job of drying it to a point, but it comes a little bit narrower when it's dried. So, you know, little thinner, little narrower. And these are the 2 things I use to do most of the page. The only other brush I really use is I'll use a number 4 if I have a really large area of black and I don't want to just sit there and, because the more I use the brush, the more I'll kind of fray it. Let me pop in and check the chat because I've been rambling for a little bit. Didn't know if there were extra comments. Oh, I see more people have popped in with some comments. Let me go back up to American Swordfish because I didn't jump. The inking thing was the last thing I jumped on. So you mentioned Inktober. Well, you know, I joke that every day is Inktober for me. So I think what I'm going to do, though, is as I post artwork over the month of October, I've never really used the Inktober hashtag. And that is something that I think I'm going to try and do this year just to see if I can get more attention on my comics and spread the word that, like, hey, I'm a guy, I'm making comics, I'm using ink every day. You know, every little bit helps in terms of getting the word out and promoting my work as an indie creator. I was also listening to a YouTube video last night from the Artcasters, from Scott Circlin and Joshua Kimball, and they had one of the original founders of the Artcasters, Jeff Lafferty, on there. And they were talking about the 100 Days of Making Comics, which I've never participated in, but I've always been a fan of. You know, that event that Kevin Cross started, where you make a video every day about your process of creating comics. And one of the things they talked about was not being, on one hand, the 100 Days of Making Comics helping because it encouraged you. You're putting your work out there every day, and it makes you accountable for working on your comic book every day for 100 days straight. And on one hand, it's helpful because of that. But on the other hand, if you're actually taking the time to make the video and record it and upload it and any editing you have to do, that is time that you could spend making comics. And if you only have maybe 1 or 2 hours a day to do it, making the video may eat up one of those hours. And that is the reason why I haven't participated in it, even though I think it is a really good idea. But, you know, they talked about doing it anyway and feeling like, again, it helped get the word out and got their work in front of other people. So maybe I should just jump on and just for 100 days make a daily video of, oh, this is what I did. I mean, even with this channel, part of it, the reason why I do this is because I try not to sit and create more work for myself. I try to just say, all right, I'm going to be drawing anyway. I'm going to be making comics. That's the goal here. Why not do it in front of you guys? Share it with you, talk about what I'm working on, what I'm thinking about while I'm doing it, what I'm trying to accomplish. So it might be a pain in the ass to do that on a daily basis as opposed to the videos I do now that are weekly, but I might consider it. And it was just listening to them talking about doing it that got me thinking that. Because every time I see someone doing the 100 Days of Making Comics, I'm thinking, well, shit, I'm doing a lifetime of making comics. But there is something to be said for the camaraderie of embarking on a challenge that other people have taken before you, almost like the Spartans having a rite of passage. So I'm not saying, oh, I'm starting 100 Days of Making Comics. I'm saying I think it's really cool. I've never actively joined in one before, and I think I might sometime in the future. But before that, I need to figure out what the hell I did here. I'm like, why is this? Oh, I see what I did. See, this is the reason why tangents are so bad. I'm looking at this, I'm trying to figure out what I did wrong. And what I did wrong is this head, I drew it like this up here is the extension of the head, and it's not. This is part of this guy's forearm. See? Even people that look like they're doing professional work screw up. And the problem with that is that there's too much of a tangent between where the forearm and this head meet. So what I need to do to fix it, and I will come back to the chat and check your comments in a minute. What I need to do is, one, clearly define the end of this creature's head, this demon. So let's bring that down. Then that. And then that. And this is a demon that has a second demon growing out of its back. And I don't know if I've talked about this on this channel. I feel like I have, but I mentioned when I was talking to one of my coworkers the other day, while I was working on Morningstar during my lunch. One of my big regrets is that I didn't get more creative with the designs of the demons early on. Because I realized these are supernatural creatures, and I designed them originally kind of like the Cobra soldiers from G.I. Joe, where it was really simple. A creature that was all black with like 6 eyes and sharp teeth. Their identifying features, teeth, claws, and eyes. That was really just what I was going for. But I realize now I'm dealing with all these weird supernatural creatures. I want to start giving them really distorted bodies. I remember reading a book that Guy Davis did. I cannot remember the name of it right now, but it's a really, really cool book that he wrote, Andrew, and it's a guy, the Marquise, that's what it is. Every time I draw something, Iron Rocks pops in and says, the demons are fine. He's always the one who told me, dude, get on with it, quit nitpicking. You know what, you're right, I do nitpick, but I'm trying to make stuff better. Oh, American Swordfish has to bounce. Well, you know what, thank you for joining me. I'm glad you popped in. I'll check you later, man. So American Swordfish is out of the chat, had stuff to do. Let me go back up and see what else is going on in the chat here. Iron Rocks had mentioned an artist needs to properly translate life into pages and panels. Very, very true. And that's the challenge, is making something that's static and flat look real and alive and bring people into the story. And Iron Rock said inking wasn't, for him, back on the inking thing and Inktober, it wasn't creating, it was tedious. Well, you know, that's why I think just drawing for fun with ink instead of pencil, I mean, if just doing it at a certain point, it just becomes another tool and you enjoy it. And Anilton Frieres popped in. Thank you for dropping by. Gracias. Oh, Iron Rocks also did say that you loved working with repeatographs and loved the number 7. Well, then hell, just draw your sheet with the number 7. Done. And let's see. Christian Benson said, I've never tried work with brushes because my lack of control scares the hell out of me. I am right there with you. Like I mentioned, you know what? For people that haven't been at my channel before, and I see, let's see here. Let me just reach over, step away from my drawing board, and oh wait, I've got them right here in my art bag. So I keep thumbnails of my, I keep photocopies of my thumbnails in my art bag because the last thing I want is for them to get destroyed, because it takes me so long to draw these thumbnails. So I just make photocopies of them and then carry them around with me while I'm working on my actual layouts. But these thumbnails, these are particularly character designs for a particular demon. And I mentioned Gil Kane inked by Klaus Janson. That was kind of the style I was going for. But these are all thumbnails for like the couple of pages I showed at the start of the stream. All of these thumbnails are drawn with a number 2 brush. This same oh, this is the 00. Who gives a shit? Point is that these brushes are the brushes that I use to draw my thumbnails. And I chose to start drawing my thumbnails with these brushes for the express purpose to develop control. It's a catch-22. You don't have the control because you don't use the tool enough, and you don't use the tool enough because you don't have the control. I found the sneakiest, the runaround, the back door. I found the trick to it, which is to practice doing something that doesn't have to look perfect, which are thumbnails. Thumbnails are messy as hell anyway. So I just said, all right, I'm just gonna draw my thumbnails with a brush. And so every time I'm thumbnailing a page, I'm practicing my brush control. And what's funny is, because I did a lot more research and took a lot more photo reference, this particular issue of Morningstar probably took me a lot longer to lay out than previous issues. And because of that, by the time I came around to starting to ink this page, this issue, I was a little bit rusty. Part of the goal of the inking of thumbnails is to keep me from getting rusty. So I sort of screwed myself on that a little bit with this issue, you know, taking too long. But the overall goal is just using this tool until you develop that control. Let me put it this way, I still feel like I have a tremendous amount of control. I mean, lack a tremendous amount of control with my brush. There's a book by Gary Martin, it's the Dark Horse, it's a book published by Dark Horse, and I can't remember what the exact name of it, but it's sort of like the guide to inking. And it is probably one of the best books I've ever seen specifically on inking. The DC Comics book on inking by Klaus Janson is good, but it is not as good as Gary Martin's book. Gary Martin's book is fantastic. It has tons of actual pages for you to pull out of the book and practice from. It shows you examples of the same page inked by various inking professionals to give you an idea of different approaches to inking. But they also give you a lot of exercise in terms of just making pages of lines from thick to thin, just learning how to slowly develop that control. And I don't have anywhere near as much control as someone who, because I bought the book, I've read the book, I've looked at every page, but I haven't done all of the exercises in the book. I haven't done a deep dive and really studied it like I should. Oh, I see another comment there. Christian, you mentioned that, well, thank you. You love that I showed thumbnails on the channel because I thumbnail at work all the time because I work night. Guests find it interesting that artists draw the same thing like 30 times smaller. Yeah, well, you know what? I am happy to share this with you. In fact, I mean, for me, that's kind of the point of this YouTube channel. I think like a lot of artists, I can be pretty introverted. And I know that seems weird coming from somebody that you see getting online every week and talking to people that he, doesn't know in person, talking to new people and sharing personal stuff. But, like most artists, I can be pretty introverted. And my whole goal in this was I'm inside my head a lot, like many creative people. And I thought, what if instead of trying to come up with some great show to entertain people, I just let you inside? So for me, showing you my thumbnails, showing you the process is just me saying, all right, this is what's actually going on in my head when I'm making stuff. And it may make you guys feel better. You're like, oh, I have the same fears and I have the same struggles too. Or, oh my God, I never thought of approaching this problem that way. So it might be a two-way street. You might discover something new and interesting and have a takeaway that may change the way you work or give you ideas of things you want to try. Or it might just be, you know what? I'm not the only one. I'm fighting with this stuff too. I'm struggling with this stuff too. Like the problems with controlling a brush, I still struggle with it. But now that I've gotten enough competency that I can feel I can draw an issue and it doesn't come out looking like a train wreck, I really don't want to let go of inking with a brush. That's another thing when people ask me about working digital versus traditional. And I've said many times, I have nothing against working digital. I think that it actually it speeds artists up, I think. It's very, very efficient for making rapid revisions and changes, which I tend to do in my work. For me, what it really came down to was it's taken me so long to get to the point where I feel like I could ink with a brush that I don't want to give up on it. I don't want to let it go now. It's like I want to break into a little bit of Barry White, never want to give it up, give you up. Never, never gonna quit, 'cause quitting just ain't my shtick. Never gonna give up. Well, yeah, I'm sure someday I'll probably start working digitally. In fact, I like the idea of working back and forth. Maybe having one comic I'm working on that's done traditionally and is sort of like the masterpiece, the thing I take the time with and spend hours working over every page, and then having another comic I'm doing at the same time that's just digital and I'm just like cranking it out like punk rock, just kicking out the jams. But I think that I will probably wait until after I finish Morningstar before I start experimenting with something like that. Let's see here. I see Greg Giordano popped in. Always good to see you, Greg. Greg also has a fantastic YouTube channel. Definitely go check his work out. Fantastic artist. Fantastic comic creator. So definitely go check his stuff out. Yes, and you know, he also has we did a great video together. He invited me on his channel and we had a wonderful talk about creation and process. And you know, and check out his comic Holiday. It's a weird Western take on Doc Holliday. It's super cool. Let me see here. What else is, just want to make sure I didn't miss any other comments. I see Sarah Studios popping in. Cyrus Studios, hello, nice to see you. Ian Rocks mentioned digital is beyond me. I look at it like a deer caught in headlights. Well, no one says you have to use digital. I mean, they're all just tools. I always look at it this way. No matter, I'm not big on rules per se. I think that there's guidelines. There's learning how things are traditionally done so that you can try those or you can experiment with something differently. But in the end, it's art. Make it for you. Make it the way you want to make it. If you don't like digital, you know what? Here's another thing. Ion Rocks, I'm calling you out. You said you don't like, you hate, forget about digital, but you also said you were always afraid of inking. It was boring and tedious. There's plenty of books that people print these days shot from pencils. You don't have to have it colored. You can do a black and white pencil comic book, and you could get somebody to adjust the contrast for you so it doesn't come out like all scratchy. I mean, you would probably have to learn a little bit of digital cleanup just to figure out how to adjust it to look the way you want to. But you can draw a book on like lined binder paper, scan it all in, and then just send it off to a printer and have them print the whole comic book just from your pencils. These days, the printing quality is high enough that you could totally do a comic book from any, you know, in pretty much any medium. You can do it in oils, which would take a long ass time. You can do it in pastels. There's a whole wide range of tools. So if you don't want to use a certain tool, don't use a certain tool. No one's gonna hold you down and make you draw or ink your comic. You don't want to ink your comic? Don't ink it. So yeah, take that. Now, I tease him because he's a good friend and he encourages me and I want to encourage him. And I think that you need to spend your time doing the thing you enjoy. For me, learning how to ink with a brush, there were times when it was challenging, but just because it was challenging didn't mean I didn't enjoy it. And the things that I do that slow me down, doing research, doing more reference, using more reference in my comics over the past year, these are things that they do slow me down. The process takes longer. But I enjoy the fact that, it's not that I enjoy the fact that it takes longer. I enjoy the results and I enjoy the process of learning how to do comics differently and better. I enjoy improving. So for me, I mean, like I've mentioned, figure drawing, and that's a big reason why I share my figure drawing work on my YouTube channels. Because even though I'm a comic book artist, I feel like figure drawing has played an integral part in improving my craft. And it's not like everyone has to take figure drawing classes. You can be somebody who's really cartoony and do surrealistic stuff, and it never really has traditional proportions. But I feel like it does so much for a person's understanding of light and volume and composition and all the things that every artist use, that I would not be the same artist. Like, I think I might actually have even lost heart or lost hope that I could be a comic book artist if I hadn't been taking figure drawing classes, because it taught me how to get better. And not only that, it taught me to fall in love with improving as an artist. And that's the real key. That's the real challenge. We all want to improve. No, you know what? No, we all want to be better, but we don't all want to do the work it takes to get better. And what figure drawing classes have done for me is it's made me fall in love with the work to get better. So if I have to spend a few days or a few weeks studying from an art book and going to a museum and looking at old masters and drawing from casts, which I have casts like small busts to draw from, and I haven't been using them. But again, that's just because of how long it's taken me to finish Morningstar, not because I don't want to. The idea of sitting and lighting a statue and doing studies from it, that pleases me. I would gladly do that for days, weeks, hours. And the only thing that bums me out is that a lot of these statues are so expensive, I can't afford to have my own little sculpture garden so I can just draw from them all the time. In fact, let me finish these lines here. Let me slide away from the table real quick. So these are some of the casts that I have. I think I bought these at Dick Blick. So there's a Julius Caesar and Michelangelo's David. Obviously they're not life size, but you see that they're the size of, bigger than my palm. These are pretty good sized busts that I have to do studies from. And I have done in the past, like I've had them sitting on my desk so that if I'm working on a large digital file at work and I'm waiting for something to save, sometimes you'll have something that takes like 2 or 3 minutes to save. If you're saving a file that's like bigger than a meg, and bigger than a gig, sorry, a gigabyte file, a 1 gigabyte file or larger. Sometimes you're sitting there and you're waiting like 2 or 3 minutes for the file just to save, and then you have to save a couple of times an hour, because if you don't, God forbid it crashes and you lose like 2 or 3 hours worth of work, So, there'll be times there'll just be a break and I'll just sit there and just have a sketch pad with me and I'll just, just work on, like over the course of a day, I may just be doing a little study of this guy. Now I don't have these at my work desk anymore. I brought them home, but I also have this statue that I picked up in Florence, Italy, actually, when my wife and I traveled there for vacation, and I realized I didn't have enough full figures to work from, and the fact that she has all this nice drapery. So, it's a nice thing to do a figure study from. And these are also great if you can't get to a figure drawing class, to have these kinds of statues to study from. And then also, I bought a really great set of tiny little statues on Amazon. I found this set, and I think it was like $40, 30 or $40. It might even have been $50, but what you got were like, I think it was like a set of 20 of these, 20 different statues. So there was probably like, they were all busts, although some were actually like close, like it was just the head. And in fact, they had also included versions of these two this size, so they were smaller. But there was like, you know, I think it might have been like 25 of them, and out of them it was like there were like 8 different female versions, then a bunch of different males, and they're very handy for studying from. Why? Because I actually have learned to love the act of studying the craft of drawing. I'm not a master at it, and I may never be a master, but I enjoy it enough that I'm okay with not being a master. I just want to learn. I enjoy learning. And that's, I think, a big step in anyone's creative growth as an artist is when you get to that point where you're enjoying the process. Stepping away to put these things back, I just want to make sure they don't get knocked over. I have to return them from whence I found them. All right, I'm back. See another comment in the chat. And just so you guys know, we'll probably be wrapping it up in about 5 minutes, 5 to 8 minutes. Because I'm gonna, try and keep this one to about an hour, a little bit under. So if you have more questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat real quick, and I'll try to answer everything before we call it a day. So scrolling back up. Let's see here. Another comment from Greg mentioning me, giving him a shout out, and you're more than welcome. You deserve it. Your work really is great. Christian Venison, I don't know why I said venison. Venson. So I actually want to get back into digital illustrations, but I have so much fun with traditional stuff. There's nothing like pen and ink, pencil and paper. You know what? That's true. There's that tactile feel. There's feedback that you don't get from a Cintiq or a digital stylus. But, I feel like by the same token, in my day job, there's times when I'm hanging around with other artists and I watch how well they draw in a Cintiq, and I see that they have control over that tool that I don't have. And so I need to get myself on their page and get to the point where I'm practicing with so that I'm as good with the Cintiq as I am with pencil and ink. Right now, I tend to use the Cintiq to do thumbnails and doodles, but when I have to do finished work, I'll usually use Adobe Illustrator, which I know a lot of people hate, but I've used it enough because I used to do a lot of packaging design. I've gone back and forth between packaging and product. And when you're doing packaging design, you're doing a lot of die lines and structure, you tend to use Illustrator more. I've gotten good enough at Illustrator that I can make very clean drawings efficiently and then go into Photoshop and add a lot of the color and the digital paint. So it allows me to be a little bit more specific. Let's see, Iron Rocks mentions that heavy metal only had a few artists in pencils. I inked it, just didn't like it. I like a degree of cartooning. Well, if there's something that you like doing and a way you like working, work that way. If there's a way that you think looks cool that you're not able to do yet, then practice it. Those are the only 2 roads. There's no other shortcuts. Let's see here. Yeah, Greg Giordano also mentions tools are amazing. He said tools are tools. You're so right. It's an amazing thing now in art. Every artist can find a tool or technique that fits their hand and their brain. We're in a greater time now as opposed to 10, 20, 30 years ago. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine doing all this, like doing digital stuff where you have to lay out a frisket? Instead of having the airbrush tool, you got to airbrush everything. It gets all crazy. Yeah, all the old school process of making stuff. But it is good to have knowledge of the old tools. So let's see. Christian also said again, before I go, would you ever consider doing a video on the style of Bruce Timm? I hate to say no to people when they ask for stuff on my channel, but no, because I'm not good at copying other artists' styles. So I don't know what I could contribute to talking about the work of Bruce Timm. I'm a fan of Bruce Timm's work. One of my favorite books when I was studying animation character design is the animated Batman. That book, if I'm sure if you're a fan of his, you probably already have it, but if you don't, you should very much get it. The animated Batman. It is a great book in showing all of the art and design that have gone into the iterations of Bruce Timm's Batman until they started Justice League. And I mean, I love his work. I think it's fantastic. I don't know what I would have to add to the discussion about his work or doing a critical analysis of it, being that I'm not particularly cartoony. Other than the fact that he's got a great understanding of both shape and volume. Sometimes you get cartoons that have really cool shapes to them, but they don't feel very three-dimensional. And he does a great job of melding the two. So that's probably my talk on Bruce Timm. I don't know what more I could discuss about it that I feel would be valuable to people, but I'm also open to more questions. So even though I don't have a lot necessarily to say about him, if you have more specific questions, yeah, please, if you have more specific questions about cartooning in particular, I could talk about things like I'm in the middle ground. I'm not a realist and I'm not a cartoonist. I would say that I have an illustrative style, which is what a lot of comic books are drawn in. There's some people like if you look at someone like Greg Land or Alex Ross that do photorealistic comics, or even if you look at someone like Adam Hughes, who isn't photorealistic, but his rendering and his lighting is much more in line with Norman Rockwell and has a realistic feel. And then if you look at the other end of someone like, say, a Scotty Young or Sean Crystal. I like Sean Crystal's work a lot, from Inktober. Sean Crystal and Sean Murphy. They tend to be guys that are a lot more cartoony, and they're drawing, it's expressionistic. Their drawings aren't just what the character looks like, but what the characters feel, and that's, my work is somewhere in the middle, probably closer on the expressionistic side. But yeah, I'm definitely up for conversations and questions about cartooning and style. So it's not just I have nothing to say about Bruce Timm, but it's a sort of a conversation about deeper things in terms of how we use line and tone and texture and composition to tell a story. So there's more there to discuss, definitely. Let me scroll back up here. Some good comments from Sarah Studios here. For a long time, I would only digitally ink my work, capturing line art in Photoshop. You keep a lot of the original energy in the line art when you ink it digitally, but loose by hand, which is usually the case, especially for someone who's inexperienced in doing it. Now I ink with micron pens and love it. Only use the brush to fill in blacks and not draw lines. I could use a Sharpie to fill blacks, but Sharpie changes color over time. So I use a brush and a jar of India ink, which, yes, I do as well. Lately, I've been using this bottle of Delator black ink given to me by my buddy Carl Altstetter. I've almost used this bottle up, but it's very nice. It's more fluid than the Speedball ink that I have. The Speedball ink tends to thicken up a little bit. But yeah, you know what? But it sounds like you've been experimenting and trying different things, Sarah. So it's good that you're experimenting and you found a workflow that works for you. Again, if you like I said, if there's ever things that you want to try in terms of like trying to keep that energy while still inking traditionally, I think that doing the thumbnails, doing doodles, and doing a lot of the preliminary work in ink instead of doing that in pencil, it doesn't mean that you have to pencil in inks, but I'm saying like everything up to you doing your finished pencils, doing that stuff with whatever ink tool you want to get used to, whether it's brushes, whether it's microns, well, you said you use microns, whether it's a crow quill, whatever it is, trying to do thumbnails with those tools will just develop the control, and you'll learn, because that's the thing. For me, I realized one of the reasons why I don't do tight pencils because there's no point in it. I am a loose artist anyway. And what I have tried to do is I try not to ink, I try to draw in ink. When I'm doing this, these lines are all guidelines. Even though I'm kind of adhering to them, I'm trying to remember to draw. And I know it sounds weird, but it's that whole thing about that joke from Chasing Amy about inkers being tracers. And inkers are not tracers. Inkers are drawing. They're drawing in ink, but they're drawing. And you have to remind yourself to draw, to not just copy, and to not just draw over the lines that you laid down. Because yeah, they will feel kind of dead if all you're doing is tracing. But if you leave yourself room to actually finish the drawing in ink, that could help. Try doing a rough, in fact, that's an idea. If you probably pencil pretty tightly, try doing a pencil drawing that's a little bit looser, a little bit rougher, and then finish it with the ink. Okay, guys, so we've had some really, really great questions here. We never even got to the topic that I was gonna bring up in the title of the video, so I'll save that for another week. But thank you so much for everybody that stopped by. Again, check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel. My comics are available on amazon.jeremy.net. If you also go to jeremy.net, you can order directly from my website as well. And that's it for now. Oh, my newsletter, newsletter.jeremy.net. I want to make some sort of placard or something, since I'm not streaming from a desktop and I can't put it on the camera. But I'm going to make a thing with all the links, so you guys can see all the links, all the stuff that I've got going on online. Anyway, you can find all of it at jeremy.net, and the Patreon is patreon.com/Jeremy. That's it for now. Thank you for joining me this weekend, and go be creative.